Recently, I had someone ask me why I don't tend to draw directly on my watercolor paper, but instead do my sketching on a separate piece of paper and then transfer it. And I thought that was a great question. So today I'm going to take the opportunity to share my process with you and how that can preserve the integrity of your watercolor paper and give you better results with your final painting. Let's go ahead and get started. I like working on Arch's 140-pound cold press watercolor paper, and so it's made of cotton and it has a sizing on it that will affect the way your watercolor paint behaves when it lands on your watercolor paper. If I do a lot of heavy sketching or playing with my composition and then need to do a lot of erasing, that can actually damage the surface of the paper. It can affect the sizing, it could lift it. It can also kind of mess around with these little fibers in the paper, and even if you can't visibly see the damage, it can affect the quality of your work as well as how the paint will behave for you as you're doing your painting. Today I'm going to be sketching these violets, and one thing you're going to notice is that the composition in the photo isn't exactly what I want my final piece to be. So the benefit of using this cheap, inexpensive piece of paper, this is just regular like computer paper, is that it's going to allow me to play with my composition. And so I want to figure out at the beginning where I would like to place these two flowers. And so I'm going to place one, I think here, and then the other one, I'm thinking to position it somewhere around here. I'm going to be playing with it a little bit more just to make sure I'm happy with how they fit together, but I'm thinking something kind of like this. So as you can see, I can lightly sketch these circles in to give myself some guidance for placement. And in the end, I don't want those circles to be on my painting. So let's go ahead and sketch the first one. So this one at the top is kind of interesting. We're going to start about the middle here. So you can see there's a couple of petals. And my particular drawing style, you'll notice, is a little bit maybe on the sketchy side. Now, every artist has their own drawing or sketching style. Some artists may have a heavier hand, some have a lighter hand. And if you work really light-handed and you get your pencil strokes exactly where you want them the first pass, you might be able to get away with sketching directly on your watercolor paper. But you can see in my case, I tend to make a lot of small refinements as I go. The more sketching, erasing, or even fingerprints that you get on your paper is going to have an influence on the sizing as well as the tiny fibers of the paper. You might start to notice the damage as you're painting. The paint will just not behave the same, and in the end, it can affect your final result. I'm going to come down here and now draw in this front petal, and then I'll come back and do the two side ones. And I'm not going to worry about these fuzzy little shapes here. I'm not going to add those today. Today I'm just going to focus on getting the basic shapes. But if you want to add those tiny details there, you definitely could. Finally, I'm going to sketch in these side petals. Now you can see I'm kind of a little bit off there with my sketch, so I'm going to bring it down. And I'm not worrying about needing to erase. I'm just dropping that down a little. And then I'm going to come over here, and again, I just keep looking at my reference photo to figure out kind of where to place things, where the shapes are. I'm wanting to do a fairly fast, simple sketch today, but still, I'm trying to pay attention to the shapes of these petals. They're so simple that it would be really easy to maybe oversimplify them, and I want to still achieve the likeness that I see in this flower if I can. This petal might be a little bit further out than it needs to be. Again, I could just pay attention to that as I trace later, or I can just bring it in a little bit. All right, so this is where I'm making a compositional choice as to where I want to place this flower. What I'm thinking is I want this petal, the one that's going to be kind of over here. This is a little more of a side profile flower, and I want this one and this one to kind of fit something like this in comparison to this one. So that's where I'm coming in here right now. I'm just going to start with this petal, and I can see I could go a bit bigger. I can also see as I'm sketching this, I'm probably going to lean a little bit more, like my drawing is probably going to end up a little bit skewed this way, but that's okay. When I trace, I can adjust that. So I'm just going to go ahead and do this. And I do like the process of drawing. I don't always do it, and there's no reason you can't, sometimes trace, sometimes draw. Now, personally, the reason I do like to sketch is that I feel like I get more familiar with my subject matter, but sometimes if I really just want to get to the painting, there's a place for tracing as well. So now I'm watching how these two overlap. I might come back and refine this a little bit after. I kind of feel like it kind of has like a center or something like that. And then this kind of comes like so. Again, you can see how sketchy my drawing process is as I do this. I'll bring this in a little closer and let's see how we can make this one, how it will fit. Am I happy with the placement? I think I'm going to be okay with it. Let's see. I'll put it in and then I can adjust it if I'm not happy with the placement. I feel like this one kind of lands somewhere like this. And then this petal here kind of comes, feels like it starts somewhere like this. It's a little bit more challenging to see because we have those fuzzy shapes as well as details there, but I'm seeing something like this. I'm also paying attention to the spaces I see between the petals to kind of help me with my petal placement. We call the spaces between negative spaces or negative shapes, but those can also help with the drawing process, so you can pay attention to those. Now with this petal, I'm trying to place it, but you're going to notice I end up with a little bit of a skewed shape here, so I'm going to be erasing it. Then I'll come back in and try it again. Just bringing it up a little bit. I think that's going to help. And then this final one somewhere here. Not perfect, but I think it's okay. And then I'm just looking at these areas that kind of have the white or light area of these little violets. I'm just lightly sketching them in. Just again, that's going to help me kind of make sure I'm happy with my drawing, that I do have the space here that I think that I do. I'll do the same thing over here, just lightly. I may or may not trace this in the final trace. Could come up a little bit higher there. And then back here, I can kind of see these tiny little, these are kind of part of the base of the flower. You can see the little bit of the sepal here, sepal leaves, and then I'm going to draw this stem, very similar to what I see in the reference photo. But this one I'm going to adjust, and I'm going to draw that little piece back there. But then this, I might make it come down like this and like this. So I'm kind of slightly changing that stem on this one. You can barely see it in the photo. And then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to have to take a little artistic license with my leaves because I don't like the way they look in the reference photo. There's only one really big one showing. So I'm going to try this and just see if I can kind of invent my leaves. So you could always look at other reference photos if you have access to other photos of violets to help you see how to draw these leaves. And that's the other thing. You might find you want to combine photos, and that's where having a piece of paper to just play and explore and kind of create your composition more or less can be really helpful. I'm going to try with this. And I'm going to be honest, composition is an area that I can sometimes struggle with trying to figure out exactly where I want to place things. And so I really appreciate being able to just practice on this piece of paper. It allows me to explore, decide what I like, what I don't like, and then make my final decision. I'm going to come in here, bring this one like something like this. I want to have a third one in here to fill up that space. Just a small one. Probably this big one could overlap and be in front, probably. But maybe I'll just pull this like that. I might even tip this one downwards a little bit. Again, I'm being a little maybe picky, but I just want to make sure I'm happy with the composition. I'm going to tip it upside down and see what I think. And I'm kind of wondering in this case if I want to bring this leaf a little bit more upright. We'll see what I think when I put it, when I put my paper right set up again. But sometimes you can see the little gaps in space, the negative shapes. So I'm just going to see what I think of this, and I'll turn it right side up again in a minute, see if I like that any better. I think I like the tilt of this better. Got to refine it right side up. We can draw these little veins in here too if we want to. I'm going to go ahead and play with these veins for a minute, so I'll just speed the video up. But this is where you can definitely go find other reference photos to kind of give you a little bit of guidance. And I think I'm going to just play with this little piece right here and make sure it makes sense with the placement of my stem. So if the stem is coming something like this, I think it's running through like so. I think I'm going to just move it a little more central, like you can see in the reference photo. Play it safe. Okay. All right, so you can see how much modifying I did here, and I played around quite a lot. Now, not to say you can't modify things once you get it onto your watercolor paper. Sometimes that happens. It totally does. But this just limits how much overworking you're going to end up doing when you get on your paper. And so it's just to preserve the paper as best as you can. And sometimes, even if I don't want to play with the composition as much as I did, just doing this process still helps me avoid overworking my drawing directly on the watercolor paper. Now, before I go ahead and transfer this, I'll also mention I'll make the outline available for this drawing on my Etsy shop. If you don't want to draw, you can just go ahead and transfer, and you can use the exact same transfer methods I'm going to be showing you here in a minute. So I'll include a link for the outline in the description below. Now, to get this image onto your watercolor paper, I like to use a graphite paper to do the tracing. However, you could use a light box. Some people do that. This is just the method I use. And my graphite paper, I make it myself simply by using a very lightweight paper. This is kind of like an onion skin paper, but you just want a very fine, thin paper. And then you're going to scribble over one side of it with, you could use a graphite stick. This is a 6B graphite stick. You could use a 6B pencil, but it will take longer to scribble. The other thing you can do, but it's not as reusable, you can just scribble directly on the back of your little drawing here. The reason I like to have a piece of graphite paper is that I can reuse this 100 times, and if it ever starts to get, like the graphite starts to wear off of it, I can just replenish it with another layer of graphite. So this just saves a bit of time. The other thing I should mention, if you do decide to buy your graphite paper, which you can do, you don't have to make it on your own. Just make sure you do indeed buy graphite paper and not carbon paper. That was a mistake I made the first time I purchased something like this, and I traced my image and it would not erase. I had very dark permanent lines, which is not what you want in your watercolor painting. And so whatever you do, get graphite or make your own graphite paper so that you can erase or lighten the transfer. If you're enjoying today's video, I would love to invite you to join my free newsletter. In it, you'll find creative inspiration and be the first to know about new tutorials, classes, and workshops. If that sounds like something you'd enjoy, you can find a link in the description below. And so I'm going to lay this on here and come up to the edge of my paper. The other thing I'm going to pay attention to is with this particular image that I drew, because I have a little bit like extra space here and not as much here, I'm going to shift it along on my, I can feel my watercolor paper underneath, so I have a little bit, end up with a little bit more of a centered image. Try my best. I'm not going to be super precise, but that's just something to keep in mind too. You can change how things are laid out on your paper by just, shifting things around. Oh, and I should also mention my sandwich here that I've made. The watercolor paper, I have the smooth side facing up. That's the side I want to paint on. Then I've got the dirty side of the graphite paper facing down. And then I have my image on top of that. So you want the right side up for your watercolor paper and the graphite side down for the transfer paper. So I'm going to just make sure, again, I'm centered, tape it down. You don't have to tape, but taping will prevent things from shifting as you trace. If I was doing a complicated trace, I'd actually tape all the sides down to make sure this is really secure. But because this is a simple drawing, I'm not too worried. I'll just do a little bit of taping. And then to go ahead and trace, I do like to use a colored pencil. This is a blue pencil here, but it's going to allow me to see where I've gone as I do this. So what I mean is if I was to use just graphite again and I was tracing this, you would end up finding out that you might get lost. You'd be like, okay, which lines have I done? Which ones have I done? Which ones have I not? But by going ahead with this blue pencil, I can easily tell where my transfer lines are, where they're not. and that'll just keep me from getting lost in the process. So going over everything simply, taking one pass, and in this case, I'm not getting all those tons of little sketchy lines, right? I'm just getting my basic shapes so that the marks that I have on my watercolor paper are going to only be the ones that are essential. So I'll just go ahead and speed this up as I do my trace. Now let's just check. Are we happy? Yes, we've got everything down. So we can remove the transfer paper in our image. And you can see we have fewer marks, less graphite here than if we were to have done the drawing directly on here. And these lines happen to be fairly light. They aren't very heavy. That's one thing. You want to press heavy enough as you do your transfer, but not so hard you dent your paper. First, I'm just going to get rid of any extra pencil smudges or graphite smudges very lightly. A kneadable eraser can be quite good for this. It's fairly gentle, doesn't damage the paper. You can even just tap a little bit if you want, or just very gently kind of rub and go around your paper. Get rid of any excess graphite, but the erasing I'm doing here isn't nearly as aggressive as if I was to go ahead and have drawn something heavily on here and then had to erase it. Next week, I'm going to be showing you a couple techniques for painting these flowers, so be sure to subscribe and turn on your notifications so you know when that video is ready. In the meantime, I hope this video has brought a little taste of God's beauty and peace into your everyday life, and that it's inspired you to continue enjoying your own creative journey. See you again soon. Bye.